What does Tucker Carlson think about dispensationalism? Hi, I'm Ken Yates from Grace Evangelical Society, and I'd like to answer that question in the next few minutes. And I'd like to do so in part by using a video that Tucker Carlson made with a man by the name of Andrew Isker, who is a pastor who currently lives in Tennessee, and he is a Bible scholar. And Tucker Carlson and Andrew have this discussion, and I'm going to show you two clips. First of all, I'm going to show you a clip where Andrew Isker basically gives his opinion of dispensationalism. And we're going to see that Tucker Carlson, maybe he's being polite as an interviewer with an interviewee, is in agreement with what Andrew Isker has to say. First of all, let's look and see what Isker has to say about dispensationalism. Let's show the clip.
And so, I think about that, right? And I think about the theology that has been that has shaped, their outlook, and it's understandable because, you're especially in the midst of serious decline. It's well, actually, it's sort of attractive to have this eschatology where everything is coming to an end, right? You can understand why people would eat that up. But the people that actually built America, right, the Puritans and all of the settlers of this country, you think of even the founding generation, that theology did not exist yet. That wasn't until the middle of the 19th century that it came into being. They were actually optimistic, right? They viewed, right, this continent as a place for Christians to build, to grow, to have a future.
What an interesting point. Well, I've never thought of that before. So dispensationalism, for those who haven't followed it, is normally criticized and defended because of its interpretation of what biblical Israel is now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a super electric topic, both
very
theologically and politically.
Absolutely.
And people get utterly hysterical about it and start calling you names or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's that. But you're saying that a deeper problem with it is that it makes people pessimistic.
Yeah.
Can you flesh it out a little bit?
Yeah. So I think if you go your entire life believing that any minute the world is going to come to an end, that I'm going to float up into heaven and my clothes will be here and everything we're gone. It's done. It's over. Right. Well, that takes a people that ordinarily are very low time preference, that build things for the future, that delay gratification, all of those kinds of things. And it flips it around and makes them very high time preference, where it's well, if the world's not going to be around tomorrow, why invest in anything for today? And you can even see this in terms of architecture, right? You think of the buildings that churches have, well, they're in strip malls or they're, just they're kind of
garbage.
ugly.
It's garbage.
Yeah. And you look at the buildings that
it's a former pet store in the strip mall.
Yeah. And you look at the buildings that Christians had before this was the dominant theology, and they're gorgeous. They're beautiful. And there were very poor people that made them, like you said earlier.
I know.
And it's that right there, you see it tangibly, that and you think about that in terms of all of life.
That is so smart. And what was the phrase you used? Low time preference?
Yeah, low time preference.
What does that mean?
It's an economic phrase, right? So, right, your preference in terms of time.
Please respect my ignorance.
Yes. It just means that you're going to wait longer for things. It's sort of like the marshmallow test with little kids, right? Where the one where in 5 minutes you'll get 2 marshmallows, or you can eat this one right now, right? Well, the child that says, "Oh, I'll wait, I want 2," right? Well, he's going to go on and have more success and so forth, versus the one that immediately grabs the one and eats it, right? Well, that's low time preference. It's a people that will delay gratification, who will save and invest and build things for the long term, for the future,
and for future generations.
Yes.
As you can tell, Andrew is not a fan of dispensationalism. He says he grew up believing it, and both Tucker Carlson and Andrew acknowledge that there are good people who are dispensationalists. They are sincere, but it is clear that they believe that they are wrong. And these are pretty common arguments. For those who don't know, dispensationalism basically says that we're waiting for the Lord to return. The Lord is going to set up his kingdom upon earth. There's still a history for Israel, and the world is going to get progressively worse, and it's going to end with a 7-year period of tribulation where God's wrath is poured out upon the world. A postmillennialist, which is what Daniel Isker leans towards, says the world is going to get better and better. And so these two views are diametrically opposed. And in the case of Andrew Isker, he points out the typical arguments against dispensationalism. Number one, that it is a new teaching. He says that it really didn't come to fore until the 1800s. Now, whether that's true or not is really irrelevant. Dispensationalists will argue, as Andrew Isker points out in the video, that they will point to early teachings in the church fathers, for example, in which there are dispensational, millennial views expressed. But really, it's irrelevant. The question is, what does the Bible teach? And Isker takes the position that the dispensational view cannot be true because in the first 18 centuries of the church, nobody held to it. But the other thing that Isker says about dispensationalism is that, and I think Tucker Carlson kind of picks up on this, that it is a pessimistic view. If I believe that the world is getting worse and worse, there's nothing we can do about it, we're not told to improve the world in any way, then in Isker's view, then I'm not going to save or I'm not going to invest in the future. It's not in the clip that you saw, but he even says we wouldn't even plant trees if it takes a long time for them to grow. And then he makes an interesting comment about how before dispensationalism, when people built churches, they built wonderful, beautiful churches that would stand the test of time. Whereas dispensationalists build ugly churches and they put them in strip malls. And I think Tucker Carlson says something like, in old pet stores or something like that. And Isker says that's the difference between dispensationalism and non-dispensationalists. Non-dispensationalists look toward the future. They invest because they want to make the world better. Whereas the dispensationalist is saying, we're just waiting for the Lord to come and he's going to set up his kingdom. I just want to say something about that real quick. When I see these cathedrals, and Isker talks about the fact that these cathedrals were built by poor people, I think that is a crime. The amount of money, the cost in lives. I've been to Europe a few times and visited these cathedrals, and they talked about how many people died building these churches, these ornate churches. Now, Isker seems to think that's a beautiful thing because these buildings are still here. I think it's horrible. I think it's horrible that these regimes rob the poor to pay for these buildings and then use practically slave labor to build them. And the other thing I would say is that dispensationalists would not say that we shouldn't invest, we shouldn't save for the future. Dispensationalists do that all the time. Every dispensationalist I know does that. But what we're saying is, even though we're investing in the future, because we don't know how long we're going to live, we don't know what our children are going to need, ultimately, we're not looking for a better world. We're looking for the return of the Lord and his coming kingdom. So what does Tucker Carlson have to say about this? Now, Tucker Carlson admits, he goes, he's not a theologian, but it's clear that he agrees that dispensationalism is not the way to go. So let's see the clip where Tucker Carlson gives his opinion on this.
So your point is that dispensationalism not only has specious theological elements, which I think very obviously it does.
Yeah.
By the way, the whole theology was like laid out in the end notes. It's not actually in the Bible.
No,
it's like interpretation in the version of the Bible.
John Nelson Darby and Cyrus Schofield, and there's, I mean, they'll claim that they're antecedents from the early church. Like, well, this guy believed in something like the rapture, and it's like, well, it's always very, like you said, specious.
That's my read as a non-theologian, but it does seem incredibly silly, but sincere. So
people, exactly. People sincerely believe it. So
100%.
Mock them.
A lot of people I really like and respect believe.
Yes.
So I just want to say that. But you're saying that the cost is even deeper because it changes your worldview and makes it very difficult for you to engage in the labor of, like, for example, loving people around you and building something beautiful, which are also Christian imperatives. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. And it also, so it forces you into an immediacy, right? We got to do everything right now because there isn't going to be a future. Right?
Yes.
There's not going to be, I mean, and I heard this all the time growing up. Well, we're not going to be around. We're going to be raptured. So why plan for the future? Why build things for the future? Why
heard that growing up?
Oh yeah. This was just everywhere in evangelicalism.
Did you grow up in that?
Yeah. I did. And I remember in college when I was first getting into more historical theology, or thinking like, what did people believe before the 19th century about things? and it's
for the first 1800 years.
Yeah. What did they act? Well, there were various different eschatological schools. Like there's all sorts of different views of how the end works. But when I first get into that, I'm thinking like, I don't know if I actually believe in the rapture. And I remember being in college and in campus ministry and telling people this. I'm like, I don't know if I actually believe in that. I mean, it was like I just uttered the greatest heresy of all time. Like I could have said, I probably could have said, well, just denied the Trinity or something, right? And they would have been like, oh, well, that's interesting. But saying, I don't think there's a rapture. What? Are you serious? Right? Like that is central doctrine to many Christians. And it has this deep, emotional connection. Because I mean, if you've grown up your entire life hearing this, and it's just assumed by everybody, right? It's hard to break out of that, even though the everybody of the historic church of millions or billions of Christians, right? It's actually a tiny minority in the history of the church that has believed that, but presently it's a majority of evangelicals.
Yeah, it seems like that theology is dying. That's just my sense, but I'd be the last to really know.
No, I think your instincts are correct. I think some of it is, some of it too, especially in the latter half of the 20th century, right after Israel is formalized as a state in 1948. Well, that gives like big confirmation that, okay, things are happening. Like there's an Israel in Revelation and a temple in Revelation. So it's happening, guys. So we've got 40 years, right? 1988, that's the end. Well, then that doesn't happen. And then people make all sorts of other guesses.
Oh, I wasn't even aware of that. So the idea was 1988 's the end of the world?
40 years after 1948, right? That's when the rapture is coming. That was I think there was a book like 88 Reasons Why Jesus is Coming Back in 1988, right? And I'm sure it sold a lot of copies, and then, of course, didn't happen.
Wow.
But
Mike Dukakis lost.
Yes.
It's kind of shocking, isn't it? One of the things that Tucker Carlson says is that dispensationalism is not in the Bible. Now, he seems pretty confident in that. He's saying that because Andrew Isker has intimated that it's not a biblical thing, it's a new thing. And Tucker Carlson, in this case, seems to be parroting what Andrew Isker has said. And he also talks about the Schofield Reference Bible, that he doesn't believe that's biblical as well. And then he calls it a silly theology. Here's an example where a guy who says, look, I'm not a theologian, but I'm going to side with you and say this is silly. And then even goes so far as to say a dispensationalist isn't going to love people or build things. they have this discussion. And that's patently not true. A dispensationalist who's waiting for the Lord to return can certainly love people, can certainly serve people, can certainly present the gospel of eternal life through faith alone to other people. I know a lot of dispensationalists that are very loving towards others, who love the church, who love unbelievers, who are involved in missions, for example. And they build things, they have homes, they have mortgages, they do these things. And you can see that both Isker and Tucker Carlson, without really getting into the biblical evidence, deny the rapture. Isker said in the previous video that when he was, I think in college, I think is what he said, that he said, I'm not sure about this rapture thing. And everyone said he was a heretic. And Tucker Carlson and Isker both take the view that if I'm just waiting to float up in the sky, then I'm not going to be a productive person who's looking toward the future. And then Tucker Carlson basically says, or he does say, that fortunately dispensationalism is dying. I hope that everyone seeing those videos agrees that they don't make their case, that their charges against dispensationalism are not very weighty. The real issue is, what do the scriptures have to say? Are we to make this world better and better and better? Try to, elect conservative politicians? Or is our hope in the return of the Lord? Certainly our hope can be in the return of the Lord, and we can still try to make this life for us and our families and our churches as peaceful as we possibly can. I just want to remind everybody that Grace Evangelical Society's national conference this year, which is going to be held in May in Texas, and you can see it on the website, faithalone.org, is going to be on dispensationalism and rewards. And if you're interested in having more discussion on this topic, I would invite you to come to it. But until then, remember, keep grace in focus.